George Cassidy was Leroy Parker, and his family moved from Beaver to Circleville, and his uncle came down here. His grandparents actually lived in Washington, and his uncle came out here and built a store. And like I say, it was quite a hub for all of the ranchers coming and going to St. George. Preston Nutter would never go to St. George. He didn't trust the LDS people. So he would always go to St. Thomas and then come up this way. And he used to stay at Nay Ranch, and then he'd come over into this country or go out Hidden Canyon and gathering place from about the turn of the century up well into to the start of World War II. And it's from this area, the roads go over and drop down into the Pahcoon Basin. You can go back up onto Black Mountain. You can go down towards Tassai and Grand Wash Bay, and you can get to Pierce Ferry. And you can also come in off the Dellenbaugh area, Poverty, and out that way, and Grand Gulch Mine. The traffic would come through here. Why are the posts standing up and right next to each other? It's not because the cows were so wild and hard that they had to do that. They couldn't afford wire. And they had a whole lot of juniper trees. So it was easier to build the corrals that way. Oh, and you can see through the slats, and it was pretty rough going. They saved the wood, and the new house, they have a really nice fireplace on one wall, on one outside wall. And they did that whole wall in wood for the old house.
I can't remember the number, but I read somewhere like the amount of people that lived out here, and it was significantly less than Mount Trumbull.
She's still involved with the ranch as well and tries to stay involved with the Arizona Strip.
She was on the Dixie Arizona Strip Interpretive Association board. She's on the board of directors.
What's her first name?
Her name's Ruby.
And she's wonderful.
Yeah. So Tony and Ruby, they're the founders of the Bar 10 Ranch. Maybe give you a little history there real quick. My dad is a school teacher. Obviously grew up in this area. His dad was a rancher, so always had that in our background as far as running cattle out here. He had a desire to have a ranch on the Arizona Strip, but needed to he couldn't inherit anything. He was the youngest, so he went into school teaching. This ranch here in Whitmore came available in the early 70s, and so he bought that ranch, this ranch here, a private ground down here, and the permits came with that to run cattle. And that's kind of how it all started right there. He thought he was just gonna, have his weekend ranch, teach school, come out here in the summers, and live the cowboy way of life. Right about that time was when the commercial river rafting in the 70s started to take off going down the Colorado River. You guys probably have heard of Senator Barry Goldwater. Kind of put it in perspective. He was the 70th person to raft all the way through the Grand Canyon. Okay, so and we know who that guy is. So it hasn't. And the reason I say that is it hasn't been forever that these commercial river rafting trips have been going on through the Grand Canyon. So this was approximately the same time my dad bought this ranch. He started getting people, these early river rafters, Georgie White and some of the others, Norm Neville's, these guys were asking, hey, can you get supplies down into the Grand Canyon to us? We're trying to get all the way from Lake Powell to Lake Mead, and we don't have enough supplies. So there was the mule trail that was down there. The Bundys, some of the Bundy family actually started doing this first, but they were not as close, and they said, Tony, you got this ranch down here now, would you mind doing that? So my dad started doing some of that. And from there, one thing led to another. He was able to, people were asking, can someone, could you take this person and get them back to St. George? They got to get back to work, so forth. And next thing we knew, there was some of these commercial trips that said, hey, what about a whole trip coming out at your place? So my dad started off by getting 40 or 50 head of mules and horses. Had a tack shed down there at the rim, and we would go down and pick people up out of the canyon, and started doing that. Had a concessionaire's permit with Lake Mead Recreation Area. It kind of just momentum built. Next thing we knew, there was people that were asking if we could build a lodge here and maybe have people spend the night, or have a facility where they could clean up when they got off the river. So in '83, my parents decided to build this lodge here, and if you can imagine, in '83, that was a pretty big feat, because one, if you told somebody you wanted to build a lodge out in the middle of nowhere, and then if you said you wanted money to do it, not very many people thought that was a great idea. In such a remote area, so it was very hard to get money. Interest rates, you may remember, early 80s. Piece of material here has come across that road, and these beams were probably one of the more challenging things to get out here, because you can't get a semi down here. And my dad kind of did it like a barn. We filled the inside full of hay in different places, put the roof up, and then took the hay out and finished the inside. Just little things like communications. At that time, there were no sat phones, there were no radios calling back to base or St. George. I mean, it was pretty remote that way. So, we're pretty grateful for Tony and Ruby and their vision they had to get the lodge built here. Well, let me tell you a little bit about our utilities for a fast forward. So all our water comes from Big Spring, which is just right below Mount Logan. If that rings a bell to any of you up on Mount Trumbull. And it's 7 to 8 miles away, so we have that water piped in here. It's one of the best springs on the Arizona Strip. It runs about 25 gallons a minute. So that's really why we're here, is because of that water source. Doesn't fluctuate, doesn't really run more or less. It's a very steady spring, runs constant year round. And then for utilities, of course, we have mostly solar, but we do have some generators to back that up as well. So I'll fast forward now. 6 kids, so we always spent our summers out here as a family working, entertaining river rafters, and that's kind of how we got our foot in the door out here, was working mostly with river rafters. As time went on, then the ranch became a destination spot in itself. So today, not only do we work with the river raft exchange groups, but we also are a destination spot where we have people that come in and stay anywhere from a half day all the way up to 4 days with us here at the ranch. And we can do, extended horseback riding, hiking, ATV tours, skeet shooting, kind of ranch activities like that with them, and be able to show them this beautiful area that we have here. Our lodge is typically closed to the public from right before Thanksgiving, so mid-November to about mid-March. We do sometimes open up for specific groups, but for the most part, we close down for about 3 months through the winter there. And so that gives you an idea on our season. The river rafting starts in the 1st of April, goes to a little longer with what we call our rancher guests, non-river guests. Down there's a sign. It's called Whitmore International Airport, and Todd else here. I might not be able to tell you all the true stories. And so it's international, right? Because that's really how we make our money. We do drug runs into Mexico and then come here. So, don't tell anyone. No, funny story though is my dad. This was in like mid '80s. We just built the lodge, and he came out once in the winter, and he was driving down, and along the airstrip was lined with reflectors, and there was a 55-gallon drum of avgas right there, and he assumed that was probably something like that going on because someone was wanting to come in the night, try to land, get some gas, and go on. So he debated whether he should put the reflectors over 20 yards into the bushes or pile them up and throw the gasoline and start them on fire. And that's what he did, the latter. But we never did hear of anything from that. But that was an interesting story about that airstrip when we were a long time ago when we came out once. We had an airplane once as well crash here in the early 80s. Well, it was probably mid 80s as well. I was a kid. Bill, Orville, Bundy were coming down to get one of their horses they had left down here. Bill was working for my dad that summer, and they came by the lodge and they saw some rocks spelled SOS right out here by the turnoff. So they kind of looked up and decided to drive up here to the lodge. This window was busted out right here. It's the middle of the winter, and so Bill, he pulled out his pistol and walked in here hollering if anyone was in the lodge, and there was a gentleman that was burned up in real bad shape in the back room here, and the day prior him and his buddy had come down and they did a little flyby to see if they were at Whitmore International or Tuweep International Airport. They realized it was Whitmore. They wanted to get over to Tuweep, and so they pulled up, but they didn't realize the cliff was closer than it was, and they stalled their plane and crashed. And his buddy, it was fatal. He ended up passing away, and that guy was able to get out. He'd remember seeing this lodge when they flew by. He walked up here, and Bill and Orville hauled them into town, got them to the hospital. The one gentleman. So there's a couple funny here, interesting. Kelly and I, my brother, this is I'm the little guy. I'm 5 of 6. My brother Kelly, he's just older than I am, number 4 of 6, and we work full time on the ranch with my mom still, and we're a working cattle ranch. We enjoy that. It's something that I don't think we'll ever get out of our blood system. We have one of the larger ranches on the Arizona Strip. We run over 1,000 head of mother cows. I think TJ Atkins, the largest permittee holder. We're second. We run the bulk of our cattle. We run on the north side of Mount Trumbull towards Colorado City, a place called Clay Holes, over on that County 5 road that way. And we also have a pretty good section down here in Whitmore. We have diversified with our cattle operation, so we're not only a cow-calf producer, but we also produce and market our own grass-fed beef. So we have customers all over the country that we deliver our beef.
Where can you get that beef?
We have a website. It's bar10beef.com, and you can also, we ship it, or we have people that do pickups at our office in St. George, just off of River Road on 2450 South.
You process it in St. George?
Nope, we finish all our animals in Penguich, Utah.
Okay.
So that's where they do the grass finish,
Okay.
and then from there they go to a USDA inspected plant. The one we use is in Fillmore. It's called Ashton Meats, and they do that for us.
Where is that market on River Road?
So it's not really a market, it's just our corporate offices, but I don't know if you know where the vet clinic is, right, as you're going down River Road.
I cover about 500,000 acres, based out of Tuweep Ranger Station. It's a unique station because it's not only my office, my work area, but it's also my house. I don't have a house elsewhere. So it's kind of a combination of everything, one of the last traditional ranger positions. So phenomenal place. I think a lot of you have been there, but it's incredible. It's got a 1935 barn, 1935 ranger station, that's the residence as well, and still also the little office room. And then all our water's rainwater catchment. We didn't have the fortune of like your spring, I'm kind of jealous listening, but we catch all our water and then it's all solar power. I actually got a lot of information from Gavin when I first went out there to kind of streamline our solar and move away from generators. A little bit of history on myself. Actually, my mom's side of the family's from this area. My dad's side of the family's from back east. So kind of being back in this area, I didn't know it at the time when I came out to Tuwee, but it turns out my great-great-great-grandfather ran the sawmill on Mount Trumbull, Warren Reed Tenney. And then my other great-great-great-grandfather, Jacob Hamblin, was very predominant over in Kelly Point area and some of the areas, across Grand Canyon. So kind of the irony of coming out here and learning the family history versus knowing that before I came out here. All that I knew is I loved red rock sandstone, and I thought that was gonna bring me to Utah, and I ended up at the Grand Canyon, and I don't think I'll be leaving. I love it over there. So, but as far as Grand Canyon goes, we have the Tuwee Pacific area. We have over to the west Shivwitz Plateau, which is everything below the rim. So up on the rim, it's Parashant National Monument for the most part. And also both BLM and NPS, and then below the rim, where your legs would be hanging if you're sitting on the edge, are the parklands. Over to the east, east of Tuwee, there's a large chunk of plateau that was formerly Grand Canyon National Monument, and that's Grand Canyon National Park now. So you have a lot of plateau, and then also the area below, which is often referred to as the Esplanade and Kanab Creek areas. So it stretches about 150 miles long. As far as communications go at Tuwee, I'm pretty much radio based, so we do most of our communications twice a day with dispatch, morning and evening, to make sure that we're checked in safe and sound wherever we're resting that night, be it under the stars or at the ranger station. I always have a volunteer that helps me out at all times, so it's kind of like many of you volunteering. It's an incredible help. Couldn't run the Tuwee operation without it. Pretty much everything we do out there is based on volunteer projects and volunteer hours. The only funding, as far as the park goes out there, is for my salary and my fuel expenses. Grand Canyon Association, our nonprofit association, funds all the projects, material needs, and everything else that usually comes up throughout the year. So it's pretty interesting. So we were able to actually rebuild the rainwater catchment, which was a $250,000 PMIS project that had sat still for about 15 years. And we did it for $12,000 donation to historic spec, and it works wonderfully. And the water's so good. But similarly, last year you would have seen me on the roof, re-roofing the shingle, replacing the shingles on the barn roof. So it's a mix of hats between maintenance, education. I do any of the emergency services, whether it's search and rescue, also resource management, kind of manage those trips that we have out there, whether it's non-native plants or animal surveys or cultural resource surveys. So it's a mix of everything. The questions that you guys all get, predominantly, I'm guessing, are around Tuwee and Torweep Overlook itself. So that's right above River Mile 180. So what folks are going to see is an amazing dramatic drop. Gavin was lucky enough to grow up next to, and a lot of us, didn't have the opportunity to probably see it at such a young age. I think you slept on the floor of with Riffy's, over at the station. Riffy was the ranger out there for 40 years. But as you get to Torweep Overlook, it's a 3,000-foot straight drop down to the river. And just west of there, if you walk about 5 minutes along the overlook, which is important to tell visitors, you see Lava Rapids. And Lava Rapids is the biggest rapid on the river, or at least the most challenging rapid on the river. Most of Grand Canyon's fairly forgiving, whether you're in the boat or out of the boat. But Lava Rapids doesn't have a lot of, it makes boaters pretty nervous, especially the private trips. You don't have a lot of room for error. And really, you can kind of just get your boat lined up and head into it. Did you ever run it in an inner tube, or is
No,
it?
only
Okay.
boats.
Okay.
I've never even done it in the small dories or anything.
I mean, it's, you're looking at it from so far above. I mean, you might hear a scream or something, but when you're down on the river, you're probably kind of a little nervous before you go in there. You feel some nervousness from the boatman or woman. So, perfect. So just
Little rat, not the big one.
okay. In one of the little, 18 foot, okay.
There was 4 people and a guy.
an awesome
He's
guy.
an awesome